are continuing our series on the book of Nehemiah, and I've got to say, we're in chapter 4 now, I've got to say, I love this guy. I love Nehemiah because he does things that most of us never do, aren't always great at. And it's his defense mechanism. Anytime someone confronts him, anytime someone pushes him, anytime someone challenges him, he does not go and do what we usually do. We all have defense mechanisms, good or bad. You need a defense mechanism. If someone does something to you, you need to know how to respond. But most of us don't always respond the right way. Nehemiah always responds the right way. What's your defense mechanism? How do you respond to critics and conflicts? How do you respond to issues and problems? When it surprises you, one day life is going well, the next day it's going terribly. How do you respond? Do you respond with ice cream? Do you binge watch Netflix? Do you fight with the people around you? What do you do? Do you go shopping? Do you buy that riding lawnmower you did not need because you have two others? What do you do? I know my defense mechanisms, and I know that they're not always great. And the thing about Nehemiah is he responds perfectly to every single situation. We saw in chapter 1 his first response to hearing that his brothers and sisters down in Jerusalem were under attack. They were living in a city without walls. What that meant is that terrorists could just walk right in and have their way with the city. Nehemiah's response, he's working for a king in another country, he's working for Artaxerxes. His response first is to allow his heart to break. He allowed his heart to break. He fasted, he prayed, and then he went to the king. And he said, "King, I need your help." And the king didn't have to help him. The king didn't have to support him, but the king did. And so the king, King Artaxerxes, sends him all the way from Persia, all the way down to Jerusalem to support and encourage him and give him everything he needs. So Nehemiah shows up. What we learned over the last couple of weeks, he shows up. And when he shows up, he focuses on the work that's in front of him. He doesn't allow any voices or any critics to lean in on him and steer and direct the decisions he makes. He is so focused on the work in front of him that day one when he shows up to inspect the walls, he doesn't tell anyone what he's doing. He just goes and he inspects the walls. He inspects the walls. And then he announces to the people, "This is what I'm doing. I want you to join me." And of course, at that moment, the enemies come. The moment you say, "I have a vision, God is leading us this way, I want you to be a part of it," who's the next person to show up? It's the enemies. And the enemies say, "You can't do this. You don't deserve to do this. You shouldn't be a part of this." And so the enemies come out of the woodwork. The critics show up. And you guys know, you have a good work. You have a good work. You have a thing that God has called you to, or you believe God is starting to call you. You're feeling the Spirit whisper, and you have a good work, and you know the voice of the enemy. The enemy says, "You don't have the resources, you don't have the skills, you don't have anything. You need to step out and let someone else do this for you." But Nehemiah, every single time, ignores the enemy. He does exactly what God tells him to do. We're going to kind of see the same thing again today, but what we're going to examine are defense mechanisms, how we respond to conflict. Because in our examination of defense mechanisms, what we're going to see once again is Nehemiah responds right in a way that we most likely wouldn't. So Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 1. "Now, when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall," Sanballat, we've heard him before, Sanballat and Tobiah. Every single time they hear that they continue to build the wall, they show up, and they show up to do what? To criticize. "Now when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria." So what does Sanballat do at this moment? He sees once again the wall's going up. He doesn't want the wall to go up. Why doesn't he want the wall to go up? Because he's one of the regional leaders, and he feels like that he's under threat as a regional leader. If that wall goes up, then Sanballat's his authority will diminish. So what does he do? He goes right up, and he goes right up to the military. So now he goes to the swords. He goes to the real threat, and he says in front of the swords, and in front of the military, he says, "What are these feeble Jews doing Will they restore it for themselves? In their minds, they know that the Jewish people have been living in the city forever. And guys, these are the lowest of the low. They don't have anything. They're living off the government dole. There is no way that they can literally rebuild a city. Will they restore for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish it up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones? And that's like, what resources are they going to use? All the stones that were originally up in the wall, they are burned down. They are pebbles. They are rocks. That's not something you could use to rebuild the stones. And Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, and so Tobiah. So when we see Sanballat, we see Tobiah, right? Sanballat's to the left, Tobiah's to the right. He's like, yeah. Tobiah the Ammonite says, was behind him and said, yes, what they are building. If a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall. So you're saying you guys are weak? You don't have what it takes? You just need to stop this right now. At this moment, someone calls you up and says, you don't have any resources, you don't become a parent, don't get married, don't take that job. Don't move there. Don't take your child to that school. Don't. How do you respond? What's your defense mechanism? Listen once again to Nehemiah's response. Verse 4. Nehemiah, he could say something to Sanballat and Tobiah, but it's like he almost turns the other way and he speaks to God. And he says, hear, O our God, for we are despised. At this moment, he could have said to his enemies, oh, wait, you don't like what we're doing? Oh, my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I mean, what would you change? I mean, you want to join our committee? You want to fill out our comment card? What do you think is going on here? We need your feedback. He doesn't do that. He doesn't show them his stomach. You guys know dogs, right? Dogs want to show that they're submissive. They show you their stomach so you can pet them. He doesn't do that. And what we see here right now, and is the challenge to us, your critic says something to you, steps up to you, don't show your belly. Don't show your critic your belly. Have you ever tried to scratch a cat's belly? That's how you respond. That's how you respond. You try to scratch that belly, they'll maul your hand out there, just chew right up. And then they'll face climb over you. And you're like, no, not the face, so I pay the bills, right? They'll face climb right over you and run away. How you respond to your critics is not like a dog showing your belly. It's like a cat. Bring it, sucker. Bring it. And that's exactly what he does. He's like, who are you? And he turns to God and he addresses the only one that really matters. What he does in this moment is he says, okay, you two have no authority or power or strength. You, God, have authority, power, and strength. I'm turning to you for help. So he turns to the only one that they can trust. Turn back their tongues on their own heads and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. He's cursing them. Right? He is calling down a curse. He's saying, God, however poorly it can go for them, make it so. Verse 5. Do not cover their guilt. Don't let them get away with this, God. Don't let them get away with this. Continue to do what they're doing. And let not their sin be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders. So what is he saying? He says they're provoking you. It's your wall. It's your people. They're provoking you. They're coming after you. God, you take care of them. You are in authority. You are empowered. You are in charge. Now, there are a couple of things we can take away from this, but I'm going to tell you this week what I've taken away from this particular reference. Is that I'm not going to give any energy or any attention to the critics. I'm going to give my energy and attention to God. Let me put it another way. I do not worship my critics. I worship my God. Amen. See, when you worship your critics, then when they say something to you, then you change all your plans for them. You give them all the attention. You give them all the energy. What do you need from me? How can I serve you everywhere? But when you worship your God, you turn away from your critics and say, what do you need from me? How can I serve you? What can I do for you? Don't worship the critics. They don't need and deserve your worship. God is the only one. Your best defense mechanism when it comes to someone criticizing you is turn and worship your God and invite his power into your situation, and don't mind the people that stand against you. So we continue here. Verse 6, I love it. So we built the wall. We built the wall. And all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. Verse 7, but when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forward and that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry. They're like, haven't we been here? Didn't we tell you shouldn't do this? Didn't we tell you it isn't going to work? We thought you were going to stop. Why do you continue to build? But they continued to build in verse 8. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And we prayed to our God. So now what we see here is, at this point, it's just been some critics saying a few things. And it's just some words. And Nehemiah has responded rightly. He has not paid much attention to what they're doing. His defensive mechanism in this situation is, I'm just going to invite God to take care of the situation. But now the critics, now the enemy is saying, all right, they're not listening to us. Let's get the swords. Let's get the soldiers. Let's threaten their very life. And there will be three types of threats that we're going to see here in the next couple of verses. And these three types of threats, I'm going to invite you to answer the question, how would you respond? What's your defense mechanism in light of all this? So verse 10, it says, in Judah, it was said, the strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There is too much rubble by ourselves. We will not be able to rebuild the wall. I want to point out, it says, in Judah. So what does that mean? What it means at this point is Sanballat and Tobiah has been working the area. Not Jerusalem, but the villages outside of Jerusalem. So he's been going to the local Jewish people. And he's like, hey, have you heard about this? These guys are trying to build this wall. What are they doing? So now the Jewish people outside who are not doing the work, they're in their villages away from the town, they are saying the strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There's too much rubble by ourselves. We will not be able to rebuild the wall. So it's by ourselves. What are they saying? The Jewish people are saying, wait, we can't do this. Our brothers over there in Jerusalem trying to do this. Who do they think we are? We can't do this. Come on, guys. We don't have what it takes. We're just poor Jewish people who've been subjugated time after time. Just let someone else take care of that. What we see here, their first threat is this. They get someone from the inside to go on the attack. It's like getting a family member to go on the attack. Now, I'll be honest. Some criticisms are, of course. What about the criticism from your own family? Criticisms from your own loved ones. The ones who should understand that God has called you to do a good work and that you are doing everything you can to see it through, and they just come alongside, and it's just like one criticism after another. That's why we don't always like Thanksgiving. Right? You get everyone around the table, and then you expect, it to be nice and kind of Norman Rockwell setting. Everyone just loves each other. But you get in line, and you're serving your dish, and you're reaching for the cranberry, and you've got that cranberries, and you've got that relative right there, and they're reaching for the mashed potatoes. They're like, oh, so you're still homeschooling, huh? You're non-GMO, huh? Okay, you're still going to that church, you're still reading the Bible, huh? And you're just like, you look at the mashed potatoes and the relative and the mashed potatoes, and you just kind of walk away. Because you're tired of the threats. You're tired of the people, especially within, coming after you. But they know how to get you. See, sometimes it doesn't hurt when someone's way out there telling you you're doing wrong. It hurts when someone is at your very Thanksgiving table telling you that you're doing it wrong. So Sanballat and Tobiah know what they're doing. They're trying to get their own brothers and sisters to attack and to criticize. Verse 11, and their enemies said, they will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work. So the second attack is this, threaten your very life. Make you ask about your own security and safety, your family. Now for a lot of us, we're not under physical threat, meaning someone is threatened to take us out. But there are ways that we can feel threatened. There are forces in our lives that can challenge us and say, if you don't get in line, you're not going to have a job. You're not going to have a car. You're not going to have insurance. You're not going to have the very things you need so that you can do what you're supposed to do. And so going after our very livelihood is a kind of attack. And the next one in verse 12, at that time the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, you must return to us. So now the third attack is this. They go back to their Jewish brothers and sisters, and they convince the Jewish brothers and sisters to say to the people in Jerusalem, invite them to come home. Invite them to come home. So these Jewish brothers and sisters are saying, hey, aren't you tired? Aren't you tired of doing this? It's real hard work. Your life is under threat. You are under threat. No one is really supporting. Why don't you just come home? It would be so comfortable here at home. It would be so nice. Wouldn't it be nice to be with your family again? You guys have started good work, and people are beginning to say that too. It's like, why don't you just stop? Just take some me time. You just need some me time right now. It would be so nice. You know, for us here at Cornerstone, we've said that we're going to do two things, make disciples and make disciples of the next generation. And I was thinking this week, it would be so nice if we didn't do that. Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to worry about discipleship? We just do a little Sunday morning thing, do some worship, do some reading God's Word and preaching God's Word, and then, keep connected throughout the week, but not discipleship when we're walking with each other through the highs and the lows. It would be so easy. It would be so easy if we didn't have to put so much time into our children's ministry. And we've got 15, 20 adults that volunteer in children's ministry. Why not just hire 2 teenagers every week, pay them 10, 15 bucks an hour, go back there, look after the kids, we don't have to worry about children's ministry. Youth ministry, we've got several volunteers. We are throwing ourselves into that. It would be so nice if we didn't really have to do youth ministry. We could do a retreat once a year. Once a year, that'd be fun for the kids. Maybe twice a year. This Wednesday, this is where I didn't want you to still up on me. This Wednesday, I made a mistake. We decided we were going to do a game night. And one of the volunteers said, hey, we should challenge the kids to bring more kids. That's a great idea. And so we need some type of an incentive. So I told the students this. I said, if you bring an X number of kids, I will eat a ghost pepper. I went on YouTube, by the way, and watched someone eating a ghost pepper. That was mistake number 1. So I've come back and I'm amending that. I'm eating a sliver of ghost pepper. No. Just out with a gallon of milk. Mistake number 2. I said if you bring X number of students, then I'm going to eat the eye of the pig. I'm going to cook the eye of the pig, but I'm going to eat the eye of the pig. And my thought was, why do I do this?
That's my
I can make my life so much easier. I should have made them eat it. No, I can make my life so much easier. But one of the kids said, I'm bringing my entire football team. And that's why we do it. That's why we do it. Here's the deal, guys. It can be so much. Yes, Sherry.
What about if us adults would like to come and bring kids?
You can bring. I'm not signing up for anything else, though. That's about it for me.
I'm going to be getting my grandchildren and my friends together.
No matter how active my gag reflexes will be on Wednesday, it will be worth it. Because we're doing a good work. We want to see the next generation discipled. We want to bring them here. We want to influence them. We want to tell them about Jesus. It'll be worth it. And so we put the comfort aside. We put our own needs aside. We do not answer the voices that says, why don't you just come home and it'll be so nice. You don't have to worry about that. We put all that aside because we say it will be worth it. We're doing a good work. We're doing what God has called us to do. I have had the privilege of being here at Cornerstone. I've had the privilege of seeing a number of people take on life's challenges, specifically take on a good work. And God is kind of knocking our heart and saying, I want you to do this even if it's hard. And so this time, I'd like to invite Sean Spinks forward because he's taken on a good work and I've been impressed by it, something he's been doing for a year, and I'll let him share a little bit about it.
good.
Okay, Sean, when I first met you, you told me you had a passion, which I was, by the look of you, I was not surprised. You said that you love wrestling.
Yes.
Dance when you do that.
Dance. All right. So what does your t-shirt say?
Backbreaker Wrestling.
Yeah.
I own and promote my own pro wrestling company. Started a year ago. Well, it started when I was 6, really, but I don't think we want to go back all that far. Pro wrestling just undoubtedly was the first love in my life. Started when I was a kid, then I wrestled professionally for about 15 years. Then me and my wife decided to take some time off to expand our family, and that's when we had Caroline. After having her, I changed a lot. A lot. And I decided it was time to go back. And as I looked around and talked to some of the guys that were still involved, that I'd known throughout the years, my buddy Oscar who was running sound, Brian, a lot was changing with wrestling, and I realized that maybe there's not really a place for me. I did a lot of praying, a lot of talking to my wife, and then I turned and looked at her one day and said, I'm going to start my own wrestling company, if you're okay with it. And it's big to start. A lot of money. As my wife regularly does, she'll point at my wrestling ring and say, that's my Disney vacation sitting over there.
Now, at that moment when you made that decision, what were some of the things that you considered when you were weighing the pros and cons?
Oh, I mean, financially up front, I had to take out a loan to start. And that's a big deal. We were in the process of selling our house, looking for a new house. Had a 3-year-old daughter at the time. Had my mother, who has never been super supportive of wrestling, telling me that it was a waste of time, it was going to be a waste of money. And I just kept praying about it. And, you know, there was a fear there to fail. I had a lot of people that were like, no, it's not worth it, it's not what it used to be. And that's actually where I talked to Oscar the first time. I've known Oscar a long time. And if something's not a great idea, and you ask Oscar about it, he's not going to sugarcoat it for you. At all. And I told Oscar, I said, Oscar, I want to start my own wrestling company. And I braced for the worst, and he was like, what are you thinking? And I was like, well, that's another sign there that maybe we should go ahead and go forward with this. I went ahead and ran my credit and took out the loan, and I started spending a lot of money. A lot of money. And then, you know, I did get a lot of people saying it wouldn't work. There's a lot of other companies in the area that are not necessarily on the up and up. They want to beat anyone else down that tries to do anything. And it was just a lot of praying, a lot of hoping. And not this last October, the one before, we had our first event. And when I left wrestling, I was actually wrestling for a company that promoted out of a church in Maryville. And the work we were doing there was awesome because it was all for charity. It was all through the church. And we were trying, man, we were putting a lot of work in, but there was people inside the company, even at that point, working against it. And we were pulling maybe about 65, 70 people a show. And then when I had my first show last October, it was perfectly double that. We were right at 150 people for our very first event, which was really big, really big.
I remember when you first told me about this, you had a vision for wrestling that you felt like was different from what wrestling has become.
Right. I mean, I think most people have a certain idea in their head when you say pro wrestling, and it's maybe currently the stuff that's been on TV the last 10 or 15 years, and it's ugly. When I was growing up as a kid, it was aimed at kids. It was basically superheroes without capes. There was good guys, there was bad guys, and like anything else, now they've blurred that, and it's not good. It's not something I necessarily wanted my daughter to grow up watching, but it's something I've always loved. And so I essentially try to turn back the clock to the time where it was simpler. There was good guys, there was bad guys, and that for the crowd. But on the other side of it, behind the curtain on my end, wrestling, it's an ugly business. There's a lot of politicking, a lot of people doing other people wrong just to get ahead. And I really try to make it a safe place for guys to come and work, where they know when they come and they come and work at my place that I have their best interest at heart, and I'm never going to put them out there with someone that's unsafe, and that it's just a good place to be.
Remember for FamFest. FamFest, you guys, most of you guys know, but it was a little warm. I think the heat index was at 102 that day. And we had your federation come, we had your wrestling team come and perform for us. Now, I was nervous that our wrestlers would never want to step foot on our property ever again. But you told me their response, and after they left, you told me a little bit about their response. And correct me if I'm wrong, their response to you was, hey, I hope I did a good job. I hope I performed well for the kids. I hope it was really exciting. Do you remember that?
Right, yeah. I initially shot the idea to all my guys, and I said, we're going to do this. They're doing a big festival at the church, and we'll set up, we'll do the show outside. I said, it'll probably be pretty slim. And it was actually before I realized the charity aspect of the event, that it was for Mommy's Haven. And then when I realized that, I had previously talked to Kevin about this is the X dollar amount it costs to put on my show. When I found out about the charity event, and I told all my guys about it, I put a post up. I have a Facebook group, and I said, I want you guys to contact me individually if you'll be willing to work for less money. And they did not contact me individually. On that thread right there in the open, every single one of the guys that did the show said they would do it for free.
Woo!
And I relayed that to Kevin one here after church in passing one day. I was like, oh, hey, that number we talked about that line, all the guys are doing it for free. And then afterwards, they all were like, oh man, we could have done this, or they were like apologetic. Like it was so hot out there, and I was like, oh, you guys were awesome. You guys were awesome. Like they got here early and were helping set up tables. Even once we had our show done and put together, they were trying to help with other stuff. And they were just, at the end of it, like I said, I think with the heat, it pushed some of the crowd out, and some of them were like, oh, well, what else could we have done? So, yeah.
Best moment in the last year, because it's been a year and a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's been a little over a year. Best moment, wow. That's really hard to say. There's a lot of them that are really good, and I can't say I could narrow it down to one.
I think Lynn can.
For me personally, I think right now I have a weird thing going on where I'm hurting constantly. They think I may have a pinched nerve. Now they think I may have a blood flow blockage, and I'm not losing the use of my left leg, but if I stand for any amount of time, basically I've had a cramp in my calf for 2 months. Just a cramp that doesn't go away. And before the last event, I kind of let some of that out to my guys and was like, hey, I'm going to have reduced function for setup and tear down. no heavy lifting, stuff like that. And it was just like the fan fest. I mean, all of them poured in, and they were like, "No, you sit down. We'll do it. Don't you worry about it." And I think it's not a moment, but just like the best thing is in a business where so much can be ugly and just bad, that like I have this group of guys that are just so eager to like love.